we'll give it. Yes, and as a reminder, the Pathways to Sustainable Invention Speaker Series will be recorded, and we will be sharing this with our audiences and putting it up on YouTube for others to enjoy after tonight. All right. Looking good. I'm going to sneak peek here in the chat. We've got folks tuning in from New York, California. We've got Indiana. We've got some Texas. Oh, this is fantastic.
Not to Zoom.
Right. And perhaps some of you who even have students that are tuning in. We'd love to hear about it or know about it.
Let's go.
Well, and if you wouldn't mind, as you're joining, please feel free to go ahead and mute yourself, because we know at this time of the evening or afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from, that becomes a little bit of a challenge from time to time. So we appreciate that. Excellent. Now, thanks so much. People will be joining us throughout the hour, so that's all right. But we are over the moon that you are here with us, spending your time, and we've got a fantastic lineup for you. My name is Kate Anderson, and I just want to say welcome to the Pathways to Sustainable Invention Speaker Series. And this is a 5-part series. We're in our 5th series tonight, and this is how Black inventors are paving the way in modern science for a sustainable future. We have teamed up with the amazing group at Society for Science and fantastic folks from the NOBCChE. So if you'd like to keep this conversation going and are enjoying what you're hearing, then please shout us out on social media, and you can go ahead and tag #Sustainable Invention Speakers. So let's go ahead and get things rolling a bit here tonight. So here, all right, I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Daryl Boyd from Science Made Simple. He's going to be the moderator tonight. We're going to take just a few minutes here to acknowledge that by joining us this evening and by registering, you have consented to be videoed. Your audio may be recorded. Please keep that in mind. We also want to thank you for signing up with the code of conduct and being respectful. So the way it's going to go is we'll have short introductions from our team of panelists, coupled with a great Q&A. So we'll urge you to please put those comments in the chat box. And because we know that we're tuning in from all over, we'd like to just take a quick moment to acknowledge that everyone here tonight is going to be tuning in from unceded lands, from wherever you are. And at Beyond Benign, we're headquartered in Massachusetts. And so for years, that's been the traditional land of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts nations. So we just want to keep educating ourselves and supporting Indigenous communities and decolonizing as much as we can. So we wanted to share that and just take a moment to acknowledge that. That being said, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Daryl Boyd, who is going to kick off as our moderator for the evening. Let me do a very quick introduction of Daryl before I do that. So Dr. Daryl Boyd is a chemist at the U.S. Naval Lab developing novel infrared transmitting optical polymers. He is the co-founder of Science Made Simple LLC and known as Dr. Boyd the Chemist. And you can enjoy many of his videos online on his YouTube channel. He's the winner of NOBCChE's Lloyd Ferguson Young Science Award in 2016, and in 2018 he was selected in CNE News's Talented 12. So we are thrilled that Daryl is going to help us out by moderating, and I'm going to pass it over to him.
Well, thank you, Kate, for the kind introduction. I do just want to remind all of the attendees tonight to mute yourself. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Again, I'm Dr. Daryl Boyd, also known as Dr. Boyd the Chemist, and I'm really excited to be moderating tonight's session. And we have a wonderful session. The session is entitled How Black Inventors Are Transforming Food Science. And we have three wonderful panelists that I'll be introducing in just a moment. But I do just want you to know that this is a very free-flowing discussion, and the panelists will explain further about their journey and who they are. And once they do that, we'll have the floor open. Please ask your questions. Please ask your questions. So with that being said, Beyond Benign, we thank them for initiating this series that I think began back in the fall and have continued. And NOBCChE, they partner with NOBCChE and Society for Science. They're partnered together to design and execute a speaker series to elevate the stories of inventors and student inventors from diverse backgrounds so all youth can be inspired and engaged to invent for a sustainable future. From plastics to climate change, there is no shortage of environmental and health hazards impacting our communities every day. So each speaker is going to be given 5 minutes to share their personal journey as inventors. Then there will be a set of prepared questions for the panelists, and then there will likely be a number of unprepared questions as well because these discussions are just so free-flowing. So with that being said, our first panelist I'll be introducing is Elijah Burks. Elijah Burks is currently a senior at Caddo Parish Magnet High School. After having a strong fascination with science since he was a child, Elijah started partaking in scientific research during high school. His expertise includes animal science, environmental science, and cellular and molecular biology. Due to his impressive research skills and commitment to academics, Elijah was named a Regeneron Science Talent Search finalist, naming him one of the top 40 scientists in the nation. Elijah is particularly proud of his project titled The Effects of Freshwater Acidification on Clams, which aims to study how climate change impacts clams in a freshwater environment. Outside of science, Elijah is the vice president of numerous clubs, including Key Club, the Student Library Association, and the class officers. Elijah is also a 6-time Taekwondo champion, and this man has accolades already, and an award-winning pianist. He hopes to leave behind a legacy that makes himself, his loved ones, and his community proud. Our second panelist is Dr. Pia Lauren Reese. She received her doctorate in medical sciences from McMaster University and went on to investigate early life biomarkers of allergic disease as a postdoctoral fellow at the university. Her work has been published in peer-reviewed journals, and she has presented at research conferences held in Canada and abroad. Following her time as a researcher in academia, she transitioned into industry and began working in intellectual property, also known as IP. Initially, she worked as a patent agent trainee, I should say. In 2019, she became a registered patent agent in Canada and the United States, working in the areas of patent application filing, drafting, prosecution, and opinion work. She has a technical background in specialized areas of life sciences and medicine, including food sciences, biochemistry, and diagnostics. Pia is also active in the international IP space as a current member of AUTM and IPO. plus locally in the life science communities in Ontario, including lecturing at Ryerson University in Toronto. Our third panelist is Dr. George Brooks, Jr., holding an earned PhD from the University of Arizona in wildlife and fisheries. Dr. George B. Brooks, Jr. is the founder, president, and CEO of NxT Horizon LLC, an ag tech or agricultural technology company. Their mission is for everyone to eat well. His expertise includes sustainability, integrated aquaculture and agriculture, urban planning, education and diversity, equity and inclusion. Appointed by Arizona's governor, he was the first executive director of the Arizona Commission on African American Affairs. Later, appointed by the mayor, he was vice chair for the writing of Phoenix, Arizona's general plan, America's 5th largest city. He was a member of the board of directors for the Central Arizona Project, who supplies half of the water in Central Arizona, and was a member of the Arizona Black Chamber of Commerce's board. He is currently president of the Arizona Green Chamber of Commerce. As a graduate student in the 1980s, Dr. Brooks was part of the first class of Ebony Magazine's 50 Under 30 series. So those are our three panelists for tonight. I am looking forward to hearing from them, and I hope you are too. So at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Elijah Burks and have him introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elijah Burks. I'm very excited to be here tonight. I think we're all having me this evening. And my first panel, so it should be very fun and exciting for me. So as I said earlier, my name is Elijah Burks. I'm a senior at Caddo in high school in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I've always loved science since I was a kid. I remember being in the garden with my grandfather and playing with the worms and everything. And I fell in love with science, some cool science fair projects I'm proud of. And because of my success in science fair and research, I was named a Regeneron Science Talent Search finalist, which named me one of the top 40 scientists in the nation, which is a pretty remarkable accomplishment during my high school career. Go to the next slide. Okay, so what inspires me? First is my family. My parents definitely inspired me. My dad was in the Army, seeing his journey to where he is now definitely inspires me. And my family keeps me motivated a lot. And without them, I will not be here today. And I also have a love of nature. Like I said earlier, being my grandfather in the garden and everything, that really inspired me, seeing how the world interacts with each other and different organisms and environments. And I shouldn't love nature into a love of science also to make some science fair projects. And Dr. Antonio Webb, he's an orthopedic spinal surgeon from my city of Shreveport. And he went through a lot of challenges and trials, but he still became an orthopedic spinal surgeon that he is today. He's well renowned. And his story really inspired me because it's like a show of perseverance and not letting his environment define him. And also science fair really inspires me. I remember being a freshman in high school and seeing all the senior projects on cancer research and microplastics, and seeing all those cool projects really inspired me to do my own projects. So I went after my own mentor and all of those things, did my own projects and had success with it. And I'm proud to be here today. So my projects, I've done 2 projects related to environmental science and food science. And the first project is titled The Effects of Freshwater Acidification on Clams. And with this project, I aim to see how increasing carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, affects clams' freshwater environment. As you see in the first graph, it shows that carbon dioxide increases, it leads to a reduction in pH, makes the water more acidic. And so to test this experiment, I built an apparatus, which you can see in the left-hand column in the second photo. And this apparatus aims to put carbon dioxide in the water, make the water more acidic, and lower the pH, and also added baking soda to make the water more basic, raise the pH. And so also studies showed that an increase in carbon dioxide has negative effects on growth of clams. As you can see in photo A at the bottom, it's a clam in an acidic environment, and it has obvious signs of cell deterioration caused by increase in carbon dioxide, which causes it to lose its mass. And in photo B is a clam basic environment, and this shows relatively normal, showing that a decreased carbon dioxide doesn't really have an effect on the clams. And my second project that I did was titled The Effects of Nitrous Oxide on Crawfish. And nitrous oxide is another greenhouse gas that's a lot more potent than carbon dioxide, but it's not really studied as much in science. So I aim to change that. And nitrous oxide levels are rising, and that's probably due to the fact that farmers utilize synthetic fertilizers in their crops management. And synthetic fertilizers are really bad for the environment because the plants can't use all the fertilizer, and let these nitrous oxide going back to the atmosphere and becoming more of a greenhouse gas and warming the global atmosphere. But the second, more risky cause is that the fertilizer runs off into nearby water and lakes, which harm the environment. And so what I did in my project is that I put nitrous oxide into tanks of crawfish and saw how it affected their growth and their metabolism. And the results showed that the crawfish had a negative reaction to the nitrous oxide. Some of their exoskeletons broke off, they lost their mass. I did dissection on the crawfish, and the lungs of the crawfish nitrous oxide were very discolored and kind of yucky looking. And also, when they're exposed to nitrous oxide, they stayed in their caves a lot longer. They didn't eat as much either. And so these projects show there is correlation between pH and organism growth, with a pH that's more acidic having a negative effect on the organisms. And so I hope to raise awareness on how the global warming and climate change is affecting the environment, and also how I also want to urge farmers to use less synthetic fertilizers, which are known to harm local wildlife. And a decrease in the plant population, the crop population, or any seafood for that matter, can have a detrimental effect on the potentially $10 billion seafood industry, and also affect humans and population growth. Because a lot of rural communities in like Northern Alaska and near freshwater streams and rivers rely on clams and other freshwater foods to feed their families and grow their communities. And a decrease in these organisms could have a negative effect on the population and the economy. And so with these projects, we really want to spread more awareness on impacts of climate change and hope to potentially curb greenhouse gases in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Very, very impressive work. We already have questions coming in for you, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna allow the other two speakers to introduce themselves. Please do put your questions in the chat. We're monitoring the chat, and we will do our best to address each of the questions once we get to our question portion of tonight's session. So with that, we will move on to Dr. Pia Lauren Reese.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you to the organizers for organizing it, because I think it's a really fantastic event. So I thought that I would introduce myself, if you don't mind the next slide. And since I'm among my fellow or my friendly Americans, I just wanted to let you know that I'm your neighbor to the north. But even though you know, you guys may not know a lot about Canada, there is a lot of great stuff that comes from Canada. So just as like a little plug for a fantastic country, the star in the flag there is where I am. I'm in Southern Ontario, and you know, Canada has a lot of great innovation that's come from it. So the individuals at the bottom you may recognize. We have Dr. Frederick Banting, who invented insulin. To the right, Elijah McCoy, a prolific inventor. He was involved in lubrication systems for steam engines, and that was his main call to fame. But he also invented a number of other things, including sprinkler systems and ironing boards. And when you hear McCoy, you may have heard of the phrase, the real McCoy, and this is where it came from. So a lot of people were knocking off his inventions, and whenever these products were being pushed on the consumer, they always pushed back and said, no, 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 we want the real McCoy. So great slogan, great people that are coming from the country. I also showed a little bit of the delicacies that come from here. This is a poutine at the top, and I'm sure everybody loves their French fries and ketchup. I mean, I'm a huge fan of that too. Give me McDonald's any day. But I tell you, you put gravy and cheese curds on this and you will, it's to die for. So definitely, I hope that you are able to try it, even if you don't come up to the north. Beautiful landscapes in the country as well. I've got the Rockies down here, you know, the crispest air, the most beautiful scenery. I mean, it's heaven on earth in truth. And last but not least, I'm a huge basketball fan. 94, when the Raptors came in, I was always advocating for them, even though it was high and low every year. And 2019, they finally did it and made our country even more proud than we always have been to be the 2019 world champions in the NBA. So a lot of great things coming from Canada. If you don't mind, next slide. So yes, I'm proud of being Canadian, but I'm also proud of being a scientist too. And much like Elijah, you know, that spark was always from me when I was young. You know, I enjoyed detective shows and asking questions and, you know, the whole concept of discovery. So I ended up going to McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and got a PhD with my supervisor pictured there, Dr. Judah Denberg. And I was introduced to allergic disease mechanisms. And my project was involved in figuring out biomarkers within umbilical cord blood that would predict children that could develop allergic disease like food allergy and asthma. So I've definitely been wearing a scientist hat forever. And I mean, to this, even now with what I do, I still wear the scientist hat, but I'm just removed from the lab. But I've had a lot of great experiences here. And it actually was this experience that led me to where I am now as a patent agent. So when I had to decide what I wanted to do in the future, I knew for me, just personally, academia probably wasn't necessarily where my heart lied, but I didn't necessarily want to throw away science education and being in the mix with science. And when I was a trainee in the research lab, I attended a seminar, there was a patent agent, and they were speaking about intellectual property, and it really sparked me. So when my contracts were ending at McMaster, and so my academic term, I was doing some Google searching and came across an ad for a patent agent trainee position, and I applied and got it. So if you'll go to the next slide. So I work with Aird Burles, Aird McBurney. Aird McBurney is a subsidiary of Aird Burles, which is a business law firm. And as a patent agent, I am a liaison between our clients and the patent offices. So I work directly with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office and the USPTO. And we are advocating for our clients' rights and trying to get them the best monopoly that they can for all their inventions. It's based in Toronto, Ontario. So I have a gorgeous skyline picture here. My office is one of those beautiful buildings. And we work with a number of organizations, different companies, from small inventors to multinational organizations that are interested in food science. So I've just highlighted a few of those examples here, like Kraft Heinz, Halewood Labs, Zero In, Lodo, and Erie International. And they work with anything from bakery products to energy drinks and dairy compositions and sugar substitutes. So I've seen a plethora of different food compositions, and I'm happy to talk about my past. So anything that you want to know, past and present, I'm happy to explore with you. So please, for sure, feel free to put some questions in the box.
All right. Thank you so much, Pia. Very interesting. Let us now move on to our third and final panelist, Dr. George Brooks Jr. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm George Brooks. I am a native of Phoenix, Arizona, which is kind of unusual. We have folks native to Arizona, but yes, we do exist. So let me tell you about my journey to be an inventor. I really don't know when it started. Perhaps I was simply born to it. My father was a civil rights leader, a pastor. We have this great picture of him and Martin Luther King. And my mother was a hidden figure scientist. They were not all in aerospace like the movie said. They were all over the place. And she happened to be in medicine. There is a very nasty disease here in Arizona called valley fever. And they still don't have a cure for it, but it was causing all kind of heck back in the 1950s. And she was the first one to figure out how to grow it in the laboratory. And in order to do that, she had to emulate the entire human body literally with the resources she had in 1953, which is quite amazing. She left that profession because the biocontrols back then, which was basically a pipette with a small piece of cotton in it, they would shut the building down today. And so she did not want to bring it home to her bouncing baby boy in 1955. But ever since then, my parents had this desire to use whatever they had to help people. My mother as a scientist, when she became a science teacher, a botanist, and she did quite well. She passed recently, I do miss her. And my father as a pastor, he was one of the people who founded a really interesting thing. I believe his doctoral thesis was about an organization that he thought would be really good to have at his church, where kids couldn't getting fed and they weren't ready for kindergarten. He took it to Washington, D.C., got friends to follow him, and it became what we now call Head Start. How many of us went through that? So as a child, when my parents would go to the beach in California, I would always manage to bring something home alive. I would figure out how to accomplish that task, whatever it took. And I still do that today on occasion. But I had an interest later in food, and how could I know I wanted to be a marine biologist. I did get a degree in marine biology, but how could I use marine food to help people in my state? And my mother introduced me to aquatic agriculture, and that took off after that. And I was focused on making the most. In fact, there is a scientist whose pathway I followed. I found out by pure accident. I didn't do it on purpose, but that was Dr. George Washington Carver. You may have heard about him. And he had a way of using his tremendous knowledge of nature, not just to look at a plant and say, wow, it's cool, but how can I use this plant to help people socially, economically, and environmentally be whole? He took cotton. Cotton was a non-sustainable crop. He changed it over into sweet potatoes. Sustainable crop, put nitrogen back in the soil. And from there, he developed hundreds of other crops so that from that sustainable crop, there will be even greater economic research. And that's basically what I do today. Through a number of serendipities out there and hearing things, I was always the kind of person that leadership asked to do things. I ended up being able to help write the general plan, the business plan for the city of Phoenix. And within that business plan, we put a major section on sustainable food sources so that everyone here in America's 5th largest city can eat. And since that time, they have initiated amazing programs in urban food production, which I'm glad to be part of right now today. I was just outside before this meeting, putting together a method for individual farmers, individual homes to bring high-tech farming into their backyards in the middle of food deserts that will allow people to eat very well and also create community conversations, not only about food scarcity, but now about food abundance and what we can do that socially, economically, and environmentally. So I encourage all of you, who are listening to this, to find that person, find that why you want, about how can you help people with your science, and then learn the kind of science that will help you accomplish that task. And then, of course, you might want to get a patent on that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, George, and all three of our panelists, wonderful panelists, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful discussion here. I do have a question this question will go to both Elijah and to George, because in Elijah, your work, you're dealing with looking at clams and the effect of acidity on the water that they're in. And then George, your company is focused on agriculture. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how important is sustainability, particularly in our current time? How important is sustainability to you in the work that you do in our time? We'll start with Elijah and then we'll go to George.
Yes, sustainability is super important, especially as how greenhouse gases are increasing in the atmosphere and climate change is occurring. I feel like we as humans find more ways to make materials that are more efficient and don't require as much fossil fuel use. And definitely as we move on towards the future, the amount of greenhouse gases are increasing. And so we can find ways right now to live more sustainable lives and use those materials and make cleaner choices about living, such as cleaner energy sources and things like that. That would definitely help us be more sustainable.
Yes, George, go ahead.
Okay, hey, first let's define sustainability, because that we as scientists have done an awful job as far as letting the public know what the heck this word means, and it actually doesn't mean anything different than it did 100 years ago. It means the ability to last for the long term. All this other stuff we do is how we get to that point, and that makes it so much easier to understand. And so, for me, from my point, agriculture is one of the greatest contributors to greenhouse gases there is. And not just in the greenhouse gases, but as far as the pollution, non-point pollution into the waters, nitrogen, non-point sources, dead zones. Agriculture does all of that. So if we are going to support, what is it, 9 billion people they're projecting now in the near future, when this young man here is going to be my age, we have to find better ways of growing food that it doesn't choke us before we can eat it. So that the oceans can be harvested sustainably. We have to use aquaculture as a possibility of growing food on land, or growing fish on land. If you're not going to, if you're going to try to recover the oceans as they are. I have the pleasure of chairing the Arizona Green Chamber of Commerce, and my focus as president is to make sure that our organization is the vanguard of the new economy, that our businesses are those businesses that are going to supply the sustainable solutions that all of us will need in the near future. When something happens, the government calls on the private sector. And so we want to have businesses that have the ability to understand what sustainability is, and then to provide those solutions that will help us be more sustainable into the future. And I particularly want to make sure that those businesses are diverse. We want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate in this new industry that's going to explode. It has to, if we are going to survive.
Awesome, awesome. So now there's a synergy between what Elijah is looking at, the acidity in the water, and then of course agriculture, the runoff from agriculture going into the water. So for both of what they do, I'm curious, Pia, what kind of opportunities in the intellectual space are there for people doing research in those fields? Oh, you got to unmute yourself, Pia. No problem.
I'm trying to avoid any weird sounds or anything, so I keep myself on mute. I apologize. So absolutely, these guys are, they're inventors, they're creating constantly. So the first thought would be to protect intellectual property with a patent. And then there's also the trade secret route, which some people don't think about. But also one thing that I think would be really great for any entrepreneur or anybody in this space would be considering trademarks. So the trademarks are protecting the sounds, the words, logos, your brand, basically. So if you have a company, if your product can be branded in a particular way that you can differentiate what you do from somebody else's business, it's an excellent type of intellectual property to consider as an inventor. So, great example of that in the food space is McDonald's. Nobody disputes the golden arches, their jingle, that da 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 da, I'm loving it. All of that you can trademark. So it's a great avenue for sure. But the main source for sure would be the patenting. And as long as you've got subject matter that is patentable in your jurisdiction of interest and your invention is new and non-obvious, then you can protect it and you get a 20-year monopoly over that invention. I just wanted to highlight the trade secret route, because a lot of people, they know of patents, but they might not be as familiar with the trade secret. And it is one of those gems where if your invention cannot be reverse engineered, trade secret is a great way to go. And a great example of trade secrets in the food space is KFC and Coca-Cola. Decades upon decades upon decades. Nobody knows what those 11 herbs and spices are. Nobody knows what that Coca-Cola formula is. So if you have something that you could put in the public domain and assert a monopoly, as well as and assert a monopoly, but nobody can figure out what it is that you're doing, then going the trade secret route is an excellent form of protection.
Awesome. I'm curious, Elijah, have you, for the problem that you researched, have you considered a device at all that could change the acidity in the water that would be beneficial to the clams, or something like that, a process or a device that would benefit the clams?
I have thought about that, but the most that I read about, well, my project, I changed the acidity using baking soda, which really isn't the most environmentally friendly method to use to change the acidity, especially like on large scale things such as the freshwater environment. Can we just pour in baking soda into the water of fish and other animals? But I read about using certain enzymes like bacteria and things like that that can actually help reduce carbon sinks in water. And that's one potential method to reduce carbon dioxide that's in water.
Awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
George, go ahead.
Two quick things, Elijah. Another way to go that is possibly tangible is to change the organism. We can't, it's hard to change the environment, but right now they're looking for bivalves, both oysters and clams, that are more pH tolerant,
Yes.
and can reproduce at lower pH levels. So that's something else you might want to consider. And going also into the patent area, I used to be an extension specialist for the University of Arizona. Now, the extension is something no one is not only on Green Acres, the comedy show, but we are people who actually exist, and our purpose is to make sure that everyone in every county of every state knows how to farm food in that county. And I was the aquaculture extension specialist for the University of Arizona, for the state of Arizona. And so I showed everyone in Arizona how to farm fish. But one thing in our industry I always saw was that the farmers came up with amazing ways to grow their fish that they didn't want to tell anybody about because it would lose their competitive advantage. One thing that I always wanted to do was to establish a fund called the User Innovation Fund so that we could pay for these farmers to get a patent so that they could take this amazing technology, get some return for it while they are helping the entire aquaculture industry grow more food. I never had a chance to do that, but maybe one day it would be nice to see the accomplished.
Awesome. Thank you for that comment. And George, you actually bring up a number of good points. One of them is the cost of a patent, right? It costs some money. So I'm going to ask Pia, can you fill us in on the cost associated with patenting a product or device?
Sure. You know, the cost is really going to depend on where you want to seek protection. You know, if you're thinking just single country, the costs are considerably less. If you want to expand, and especially if you want to go into countries where you need translations of the applications, then you continually add more and more costs. And in addition, you know, maintenance fees and your prosecution fees, they all kind of add to the ultimate end of getting the patent in any jurisdiction that you choose. But I would say generally, if you wanted to obtain a patent in US or Canada, the costs are probably generally like $20,000 to $40,000 when you say everything kind of all in. And a huge chunk of that is really maintenance fees. Between Canada and the United States, just to maintain the application, just so the government knows that you're actually active in this space and you want to have this application granted and that you will practice your invention once it is granted, those fees can be like $20,000 from the start to the end of the term of the patent. So it definitely does get very expensive, but if you are in a space that's highly competitive and you believe in your product and you are willing to assert your right to exclude others and go after infringers, then those costs will be nothing. Once you have, you know, your blockbuster idea, somebody's infringing it, and you can go after them for the remedies in the federal courts.
Awesome, thank you. George, I wanted to ask you, you've given really good historical context. I too was very influenced by George Washington Carver. And also, I caught your Green Acres reference. I'm not sure if everybody caught that, but in any case, you said that inventing was just something that, it sounds like it was something that was just a part of who you were growing up. So I want to ask this of Elijah as well, but start you off, George. What is the most exciting part of innovating and inventing from your perspective?
How it helps people. That's just that's just me. My background. I'm a preacher's kid. I'm a science kid, and put those together, and you got me. And their things and our mind were always, how can we harness this power to make life better? And when I'm able to accomplish that, it's wonderful. And then there's a small joy I get out of doing things that people say I can't do. But no, helping people is the biggest thing for me. If I can do that, then I'm all right.
Awesome. Elijah, similar question. So what really inspires you to pursue the research route that you went into, and what inspires you about inventing?
The thing that inspires me most is seeing how you can help people, like Dr. Burks said. And the research that I've done is kind of more of a underrepresented part of science. People don't really research freshwater compared to saltwater. They don't research crawfish, not as much. But I feel like giving a voice to those parts of science, and also giving a voice to people who live in Northern Alaska, who rely on freshwater organisms to feed their families. And I feel like I'm making a change in the world, and hoping my research outlives me and can help one day find a solution to climate change. But also like seeing the results of the things I've been, like the apparatus I made, it took months to make, and so much troubleshooting and problems with having the electricity next to water and things like that, and trying to make everything safe and keep it running for a course of a month. And so seeing the results of the study and how apparatus works, and seeing it put in all the reagents into the water, that was so much fun to see. And knowing that like I'm a scientist now, I'm an inventor. And so seeing all that research culminate was a fantastic thing.
Nice. Pia, what really drives you as somebody who looks at a product that comes in, perhaps from a company like NxT Horizon, or from an academic setting like where Elijah's at? What really drives you? What makes that exciting for you to look at the intellectual property, the claims? What really excites you about the field that you're in?
Mm-hmm. So what really excites me for sure is seeing the success stories. You know, when you're in the lab, sometimes things don't work, and that's unfortunately the way of the scientist. And maybe one of the reasons why I figure, you know, academia is not really for me. So it's nice to see when things work and you get to help that inventor protect and build that monopoly over that invention. But one of the really interesting parts of the job is we don't just look at what the inventor comes in with and say, okay, this is your claim, this is the only scope that you can get. We're always thinking of different avenues. We have to think of the infringer. So we wear many different hats. We're an advocate for the client, but we're also the infringer of the claims that we're going to draft, because we want to make sure 20 years down the line that that person is not going to be able to get around these claims. So that's kind of a fun part of the job, when you get to be creative and think outside of the box.
I just want to say, as an aside, I'm on a number of patents at my job at the Naval Research Lab, and I am thoroughly impressed with the various ways that they could actually look at what I've done. I write up a draft of everything, and the way they cover the patent, they're trying to cover it from so many different ways. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's no way I would have ever seen that coming. So it is really impressive. The notion of thinking about what is somebody else going to be looking at that they could try to take advantage of, and how can we really protect the property, the intellectual property of my client. So it's really wonderful. Elijah, there was a question in the chat, and let me just say once again, to encourage everyone, we have a few minutes left. Please, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat. So there was a question, Elijah, just looked like a general question. Have you studied the field of biomimicry?
I have not studied that field, but I do know a little bit about it. And I feel biomimicry can definitely be an asset to making the world more sustainable. Looking at nature, it's one of the most efficient and one of the smartest things on the planet. You're seeing how woodpeckers have the ability to ram at a tree trunk and not get a concussion. And also one project on how they're making helmets more safe for players, modeling the helmets after the brain of a woodpecker. And so biomimicry is definitely a way to make the world more safer and sustainable.
Awesome. I think this question is for George in the chat. It says, do you think controlled environment agriculture will play a more major role for food production in the future?
CEA will play a major role, but it's not the only role. CEA has its places, but there are also other methods of agriculture that will continue to have this place as well. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with it, CEA is the process of where you are growing large amounts of food inside of controlled structures where you control the environment. That could be a greenhouse, or it could be that big box supermarket, or the big box building in your city that the factory went out of business and you are now filling it full of lights and growing tomatoes. And CEA is becoming, vertical farms are very popular. And they're also providing jobs, particularly when they are put in underserved areas. But the nature of CEA, and because it is a capital intensive business, is that the food that it produces has a fairly narrow range. And that has its place, and they're going to do very well. You also have to look at how can you apply these same high yield technologies in a low cost manner across a wider part of society, so that areas in food deserts can grow their food in the same manner that a CEA farm, but at a much lower cost, and also be able not just to grow lettuce, but also collard greens. And this is actually what we're working on right now today here in the city of Phoenix, how we can bring these high yield, low cost technologies across our food deserts, so that the people in these areas can now have abundant food, and also ownership of the food source, not just the big CEA farm nearby. Again, I have nothing against the CEA, but I'm looking at a broader picture here that provides more equity as far as the application of the science.
Great answer. I see in the chat, I think this one's for you, Pia. How tricky is it to work with patents that come out of research in a college setting?
I guess the major challenge with that type of research is one of the distinctions in the field, actually. So when you're in academia, everything is about publish or perish. When you're in the patent and intellectual field, it's publish and perish. So the or changed to an and. And that's one thing that is a little difficult to work with inventors, because they're just or academics, sorry, that are inventors. They just constantly want to publish because they need the grants and it's about their exposure, et cetera. So kind of calming down those fires can be a bit of an issue. But generally, as long as they know something's coming up, they've either got a conference or they've got a journal publication that's going to go to press, as long as they can inform us with a decent amount of time. I mean, if it has to be a day, it's a day, but, just so we can get something on file to protect them, because we want to make sure that any country that has an absolute novelty issue where you disclose anything, now you can't get a patent filed, we want to avoid that situation. So at least getting like a US provisional based on that subject matter, and then they can go to town with their publications and disclosures.
Yeah, excellent advice. I've learned that the hard way. So George, you're actually in a city that is, and thinking about the concept in context with the environment and even our forum tonight, you are in Phoenix, Arizona, which is out where it's real dry out there. And there's been quite a drought out in the West for a long time. And water, I know at times has been restricted by municipalities in Arizona. Like you can only put out water certain days of the week or only so much water, that kind of thing. So what do you see as a solution to the lack of water out in an area like where you are?
If now I could say if I had that answer, I'd be rich, but I'm not. But water is the #1 concern here in Phoenix. Half of our water comes from the Colorado River, and it's pumped 3,000 feet uphill, literally, from the Colorado to get to Tucson. As far as the elevation, it's all uphill. Very expensive canal system. And because of the drought that's being exacerbated by climate change, the Colorado River no longer reaches the sea. It hasn't reached the sea since 1993, which has caused amazing economic damage down in Mexico because of all of the fisheries that depend on the Colorado River Delta to be the nursery for the species that they harvest. And now, when they allocated the water between Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, California, etc., they allocated that water at a high point in water flow. Now we're at a low flow, and we are now actually in that official drought. It has been called, and now we're about to go back into those water use regulations in the very near future. Arizona, because we're a junior water user, we're going to lose part of our water first. And then there's really, don't know how far this is going to go, but as being a member of the water board at times, I've seen some very ugly things happen in those meetings. I've sometimes wonder, like, why am I here? The answers are wide and varied, but we are going to have to make use of less water. We're going to have to make use of less water in how we manage our homes. Every building out here in Arizona now has low water use water faucets that come on automatically and turn off automatically, saving water. Low flow shower heads, low flow toilets, everything you can think of to use less water. We are looking at ways of agriculture is going to lose their water first, unfortunately. All of these require innovation, however. We have a huge opportunity in the realm of ag technology, ag tech, to devise methodologies to allow us to use less water as we farm our food, whether it's in urban agriculture, whether it's in transportation. And this is a must. We can't not get around it because the water simply is going away bit by bit. That's the best answer I can give at this moment. But the nature of innovation is that you can always think of something new. But I want to add one last thing. Solution-based innovation is one of those areas where there's great economic opportunity to those who create those resources. And it is extremely important to me that a diversity of people are involved in the creation and then understand how they have that information protected so that it continues to be of benefit to their families and community. And that's all that's been the case, it's been the case in the past, and that didn't happen. Even the great Dr. George Washington Carver didn't patent anything. It is said today that if he had patented all of his resources, Tuskegee would be as rich as Harvard. And so that is a lesson that we must think about as people of color. To participate, to innovate, and to be successful, we must understand how to manage this just as well as anybody else does.
Thank you for that. You provided a wonderful segue because we're getting ready to close out here. You have just a couple of minutes. I want to ask both Elijah and Pia, kind of based on what George had just pointed out, that it's important to have diversity and it's important to be forward thinking in terms of innovation. And so what does it mean, Elijah? Well, let me start with Pia. Pia, what does it mean for you to be a Black woman in the field that you're in, doing the job that you do? What does that mean to you? Just briefly.
No, for sure. For me, it means opportunity, opportunity for others, more importantly. I'm in a space where there are not a lot of people that look like me. I actually was reading an article and they said that for the top 16 law firms in Toronto, 1% of the partners are Black. So this is 35 individuals and about 4,000 non-Black individuals. So it's a tough market out there, but once you have individuals that are making their way in this area and they're willing to help others come up, which I absolutely am, once I get to the heights that I'm trying to get to, it's absolutely an opportunity. It's a paving the way forward and bringing other people up with you because, strength is in numbers. So I think it's great that there are people like myself that are here and that want to make that change and see difference in the future.
All right, Elijah, similar question, just 30 seconds if you can. What does it mean for you as a young Black man? What does it mean for you to be pursuing a career in science?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dr. Pia. Representation is super important in this field. And being a young Black scientist as myself, I feel like I'm kind of paving the way for others like me who want to be a scientist one day, because you can't be what you can't see already. And so hopefully I can be like the kind of person who inspires others and wants them to pursue dreams that they didn't know they could pursue. And definitely to know that science doesn't care about your background or who you are, but you can definitely be a scientist too, no matter where you come from. And hopefully one day I can mentor others and inspire them also.
Right, this young man, I'm impressed. Didn't he carry himself like a grown professional? All right, so with that, do thank our panelists, Dr. George Burks, Dr. Pia Lauren Reese, and Mr. Elijah Burks. Wonderful panel. I love the diversity here. We have a very well accomplished elder statesman in Dr. Burks, and we have this young aspiring scientist, Mr. Elijah Burks, and then we have this wonderful Black lady, Pia, doing it in a space where she is rare. So with that, I also do want to just close out by thanking Beyond Benign for setting up this forum, along with NOBCChE, as well as along with Society for Science. So thank you all for helping to put this session together. You've been wonderful, and I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Thanks so much. Really, final words. I mean, those were so powerful from all of you. And thank you for being role models. Thank you for elevating voices and being the amazing humans that you are. And it is incredibly important that we get more and more people in the room helping to create, innovate, make the decisions. And I completely agree. We need to get spreading that wealth around so that there can be all communities are taking part in, solving some of the most crucial sustainability issues that we have at this time and monetizing that. And that's what we can do through the patent process. So, because there is true opportunity there. So really well said. And really in closing, we just want to thank the Lemelson Foundation for making this all possible and funding this program. And for those of you who have tuned in, please be sure to go to our YouTube channels for Beyond Benign, NOBCChE, and Society for Science, where you can see all of the recordings. And we thank you very much and have a fantastic evening.